go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. And we could do the refuge from the Shakyamuni Puja. To the excellent Buddha, Dharma, Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until the attainment of awakening. Through the punya of my dana, shila, kshanti, vidya, dhyana and prajna, may I attain Buddhahood for the welfare of all sentient beings. To the excellent Buddha, Dharma and Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until the attainment of awakening. Through the punya of my dana, shila, kshanti, vidya, dhyana and prajna, may I attain Buddhahood for the welfare of all sentient beings. To the excellent Buddha, Dharma and Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until the attainment of awakening. Through the punya of my dana, shila, kshanti, vidya, dhyana and prajna, may I attain Buddhahood for the welfare of all sentient beings. So the refuge that we do when we say refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings are brought to awakening, it's like encapsulates the essence of the whole refuge and Bodhisattva vow. And the longer one that we do in the Shakyamuni Puja each morning sort of breaks it down into, well, you need Buddhas, yes, but then you need the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha, and you need the Sangha, those who teach it and bring it to us and our companions on the way. So it's all part of that same mandala, it's all integral to one mandala. And so that's the refuge in the three jewels, and then the second part of it, in order to bring all beings to awakening, that's the Bodhisattva part, where you're not just wishing to reach awakening for the sake of all beings, but you're wishing to do what it takes to get there, which is practice the 6 paramitas. So that's why you mentioned the punya arising from the shila, the generosity, the shila, the discipline, or the keeping our word, the power of that, and the staying power that arises from keeping our word, kshanti, steadiness, and that the energy that generates to be able to practice and integrate all our energy into samadhi as the basis for then seeing the truth as it is, which is prajna. So not just seeing it for a flash or a moment, but actually being able to stay there. So that the Bodhisattva is practicing like that, and committing themselves to practicing like that in order to realize awakening for the benefit of all beings. And in fact, the two are the same, aren't they? The refuge, we're taking refuge with that determination to follow the path until we reach complete and perfect awakening. And complete and perfect awakening is always for the benefit of all beings. So the Bodhisattva vow is like an affirmation of the refuge vow when we've understood the refuge vow sufficiently to be able to really focus on the need to develop that, align ourselves, rather than develop, but to align ourselves with that motivation that arises to benefit all beings, and liberate all beings, which arises from having seen that's actually possible, and therefore committing oneself to doing it. So it seems like early days, doesn't it, to say, do I really see it's possible? So we're at the stage of aspirational bodhisattvas, where we have faith it's possible, because the bodhisattvas have done it and they say this is possible, and we're working on it, and we're making this aspiration because we're working on it and want to also do what the great bodhisattvas have done. So what do you do like a child? What are the adults doing? Oh, they're taking this vow. Okay, I'll take this vow too, because I'm part of the same mandala. I'm trying to, and I'll be supported by this same mandala. So these two vows, the refuge vow and the bodhisattva vow, kind of feeding into each other all the time. It's interesting, the idea of thinking of them as separate. I know Sangha Akshita was doubtful whether there was any point in thinking of them as separate. Isn't refuge already bodhisattva vow? I think there is a point in thinking of them separately, especially when you read the sutras and how the bodhicitta arises in the hearts of the beings when they listen to the Buddha speaking. So they've already taken refuge, but the bodhicitta hasn't really arisen, or hasn't arisen in that very real sense. So it's a big event, the bodhicitta pada, the arising of the wish for realizing enlightenment, which arises really as your understanding increases, your faith increases. Therefore, that allows that heart wish we have really to liberate all beings. It allows it to it empowers, it enables us to actually make that commitment with more and more conviction. And it's become the custom for us to take the bodhisattva vow, even if we haven't had that experience of the bodhicitta pada, even though we haven't had that realization, we're aligning ourselves with it. We're committing ourselves to aligning ourselves with it in the best way we can. And that's already something to be rejoiced at. Just the fact that we've got to the point where we are inspired enough to make that aspiration, make that pranidhana, say, this is what I will do, and then the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can actually then use that to hook us into that movement towards awakening that they themselves are in a way, and it's their adhisthana really that transforms our aspiration into a reality gradually as we practice. So it's a big thing. Both refuge and the Bodhisattva vow are huge steps. From our point of view, when we look at our lives and how meaningless our lives are until we actually have some real sense of direction in terms of the refuge. It kind of seems like setting my own house in order, getting myself orientated, organizing my thoughts and feelings and intentions into a clear direction in life that will take me through this life and through the death process into future lives. So from our point of view, it seems like a personal decision and commitment and training, because obviously we take refuge before we really understand what it means, because we're not going to understand it until we're enlightened, really. So we're sort of taking it in the dark, but we're taking it with this kind of determination. But from the point of view of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, whose mission is to bring all beings to complete and perfect awakening, trying to hook onto us is really, we slide off all the time. So if beings actually then formally, with witnesses and determination and strong, clear intention, say, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, that's a chance. Now we can start to really kind of pull that being into the awakened Mandala, the Awakened Heart Mandala, if you like. So there's great rejoicing, and it's kind of, although we think small, there isn't any small. In emptiness, there is no small. There's significant, moving in the direction of the ending of suffering. And this is a deed. Taking refuge is a deed that is significant in terms of the ending of suffering, not just for ourselves, but for all beings. So, in a way, the whole universe rejoices. It's as if the whole universe can sense something really significant is happening. And when in the sutras it describes how when the Bodhisattva first gives rise to bodhicitta, really genuine realization, the earth shakes. When the Buddha reaches enlightenment, the earth shakes. When the Buddha passes into nirvana, the earth shakes. So what is that earth that's shaking? It's a fabric of the universe itself. It's those hidden connections that they're jnana connections, really. They're not connections that you can sort of analyze out and separate out. It's like all of a piece. The whole of totality is all of a piece, and when you move this bit, then the whole thing shakes. It's a wonderful image, isn't it? So in our small way, we are actually participating in this cosmic event that we hardly are aware of what we're doing. But even in our own small world, there's a sense of this is an occasion for rejoicing. This is an occasion for joy and hopefulness and meaning, and meaning's important, isn't it? What gives our life meaning? As we get up in the morning, what is the story we're telling ourselves that gives it meaning? It could be drudgery, it could be just survival, it could be just getting through the day, but it could be actually my next step on the path to awakening, whatever it brings. This day is my chance to turn whatever happens to me on this today into the next step on my path to awakening. And we've been talking about welcoming difficulties or embracing difficulties, not seeing difficulties as somehow getting in the way of our practice, but actually as this is it. This is our opportunity to practice in this very situation that I'm faced with today. And that's going to be good enough. That's going to be plenty enough. Even if it's just being able to maintain my steady faith and sense of refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha through a day in which I just feel like it's hell. I'm still on the path to awakening, and I'm actually going through this experience. Tibetans have this lovely way of saying in a very cheerful voice, "Oh, it's sin's finishing." It's like it's a karmic result that is actually exhausting itself. It's playing itself out, and it will be finished. And they even think of a whole lot of suffering coming at once in one lifetime or one period of your lifetime. This is a blessing of the Buddhas because it's brought it all into this time now while I have the refuge and I have faith in the Buddha. It's come now so it can be purified. Whereas at another time, if this suffering had come when I wasn't in so protected by the refuge, it could have dragged me down even further and even to a worse and worse situation. But if I can just stick it out with this faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, it's actually something that's finishing. And they have this very strong sense of It's finishing. Whatever's happening to them, oh, that's all right. So that's finishing. That's finishing. Rather than other attitudes that can really drag you down further, can't they? Something very practical about thinking in that way. So when I came to think about my talk this morning, I thought, oh my goodness, Refuge, I think this every year actually, Refuge and Bodhisattva Vow, all in one talk. Two such major topics to talk about and train in. So I'm very happy now that Tara has really started to put together a training and materials for training in preparing to take refuge in the Bodhisattva vow. And I do hope that those people who've not had the benefit of these courses or training, so they took refuge before these courses were available, or took the Bodhisattva before they were available, will take advantage of these materials and these courses as they occur over the years to come. Because to be honest, I think it's probably at least a year's training in refuge to understand the different elements, and the same for the Bodhisattva vow. And yes, of course, once you've taken the refuge and you've taken the Bodhisattva vow, the next step is to deepen your understanding of it. So whether you do that before you take refuge or after you take refuge is just depends on where you came in on this spiral learning. So I'm very heartened by the fact that Tara's really started thinking about that and started implementing it, so that the group who've taken refuge in Bodhisattva vow this year, I think, have had much more training really than certainly a few years back, and it's going to get better and better. In terms of our 6-year training program, I see the really developing the teachings on refuge and Bodhisattva vow as coming under that 5th heading of pranidhanas. Sort of how do we formulate our intentions and make pranidhanas and commitments with a really powerful way of understanding what we're doing. And that depends on how well we understand the vasta vision, the sort of cosmic view of Buddhism, and the whole sense of future lives and the nature of endless samsara and the nature of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, karma, rebirth. I mean, all those topics are vast, actually. It's a much vaster vision than we have in the West. When I'm watching these programs, these of discoveries about the cosmos, your Brian Cox, the wonder of the universe, and look at this huge planet of Saturn, and it's how far away it is, and how vast it all is, and how wonderful it all is. And from the point of view of the Buddhist cosmos, it's really nothing much at all. The Buddhist cosmos is just like blows that apart, galaxies, solar systems, galaxies. It's all blown apart because you're talking about, it's not just material bits floating around in space. It's actually space that's absolutely packed with beings. I mean, in science, we tend to talk about beings that we can actually sense through our senses. But, from the Buddhist point of view, that's almost nothing compared with what the kind of living space that beings occupy. They're all interpenetrating and they just go on endlessly. And endlessly is something you can say very easily, can't you? Oh, it goes on endlessly, and you just sort of big as you can get and then fade out. And that's always just nothing to do with endless. That's always nothing to do with it, because endless means that however big you think, it's always going to be nothing compared with endlessness. I mean, just a mere trace of maybe something you could find if you had the right coordinates. You might be able to trace where it must be. It's just like very interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting how even I find I can think of Buddhas and endless Buddhas and Buddha realms and think, wow. And then I think of Saturn, and it seems to suddenly fill the whole space of my mind. I think, oh, so that I was opening up to something, and I can see it's my own thinking that's closing down all the time. It's closing down and thinking, this is bigger than that, and I can think that far, but then it goes fuzzy, and I think, well, it goes on after that, but it's still as big as I can think. It's kind of bigger than what's beyond it, if you see what I mean. Whereas it's the other way around, and I can see it's my thinking that's doing that. So this thinking vast is actually another way of thinking in the direction of emptiness. Because we tend to think emptiness, things are made of parts, and then you break them down, and they're smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller parts until there is no parts. They're just, the points have no dimensions. But again, your thinking has made them small. It's the same kind of thinking that won't go big. So when we're thinking of the refuge and when we're thinking of the Bodhisattva vow, we're committing ourselves to this thinking big, which is actually emptiness. Almost like a contradiction, isn't it, from where we are now? And we're emptiness. No wonder it's scary. But at the same time, it's weirdly familiar. It has to be, because it's what we are. So I prepared my talk with lots of notes and thinking I'll never get through all of that. And then I talked about something else altogether. Oh dear. Oh well. It's all worth saying, isn't it? It's all relevant. So where was I? What did I mean to talk about? I've mentioned some of the things I meant to talk about. So the two themes I wanted to focus on was refuge as a mandala. We talk about the three jewels, and when I first heard of the three jewels, it didn't really resonate for me, because I thought of plonk, 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 three jewels. And actually it's a mandala. It's the five certainties, isn't it? It's like the priceless, precious, nothing in the world more important than the Buddha. And nothing more important than what the Buddha is teaching, the reality the Buddha is demonstrating and teaching, which is the Dharma. And then there's nothing more important than situation in which that can be drawn out of the Buddha and we can be part of. So it's like a mandala of the Buddha and the Buddha's, you could say the Buddha's radiance. I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently, listening to some teachings from Refuge and realizing, oh yes, when you think of the sun, you don't just think of the sun, and I'm thinking about in your everyday experience of the sun there's the sun and there's a radiance of the sun, and they're inseparable, aren't they? The sun comes out. When the radiance of the sun is there, you say the sun's come out. That is the sun. The sun and the source of the radiance of the sun are like one reality. And I think it's really very useful to keep that image in mind when you're thinking of the three jewels. Like the Buddha isn't just the sun, but actually the whole radiance of the sun, which is the Dhamma and Sangha. So they're the natural voice and body of the Buddha, really. In a kind of sense of a mandala. They're all of a piece, aren't they? And so when we enter the mandala of awakening, we actually enter into something, we become all of a piece with that mandala. You're not like a separate thing that's joining into something. We're entering that mandala, we're creating it as we enter it, and there's an energy that we're contributing to and that we're receiving, and the more we open. And that's why the giving is so important, because there's a sense of, not there's me getting something, but there's I'm entering and I'm contributing, I'm giving. And then that has a response. The gift is then, you get back the energy in response to that because it's received and that's energized, that connection. That's why the first move is giving. And it's proportionate to what you have. So if you don't have anything much, and you see the Buddha and you think, I must give something, what should I give? And then you grab a flower or you grab even a piece of grass, so you give it. And then that, because it's a mandala and you've engaged with it, then the energy comes back to you. So of course, if you have a lot of money and you think, well, it's all right enough just to give a piece of grass, so here you are. It's not the same movement at all, is it? You don't have to offer much. Oh, good, here you are, a piece of grass. It's not the same thing. We all know that, don't we, when we receive gifts from someone. If it's somebody who really hasn't got much and they give you something, that really produces a strong effect, doesn't it? And then somebody who's very rich in a situation and they give a little bit of what they've got, well, of course it's good and it's helpful and you're glad about it, but it hasn't been the same. It hasn't created the same connection as the small gift of a person who's giving all they've got. So there's a lot of room for play there, isn't there? A lot of room. Different situations, we all do different things in different situations. So some people are giving a lot in terms of their practice, and other people in terms of their service to the Sangha. And not everybody has to give in the same way, but you'll get back in proportion to what you give. That's the point. I want to keep coming back to the Mandala principle aspect of taking refuge. I think especially in terms of the guardians of the mandala. Like, we know what the commitments are. When we take refuge, the commitment is to, at the very least, to keep the 5 precepts. And keep them in the gross sense. When I say the gross sense, in the sense of not killing other human beings and not stealing in that sense where you can't be trusted in society because you've got no respect for other people's property and their boundaries, really. So, and not to lie in a way that's actually deceiving people in a harmful way, and sexual abuse of any kind, really, taking advantage of people sexually. And then, of course, becoming so intoxicated you can't control your behaviour. And this applies, of course, the obvious application here is drink driving, because you're not fit to drive a dangerous vehicle, if you've been intoxicated in any way. So what happens if you find yourself in a situation where something like that, you have done something like that, because it does happen. Sometimes we go off the rails. Does that mean that you've broken the refuge? No, it doesn't mean you've broken the refuge unless you don't repent it and you think it's all right. That would be. But if you don't think it's all right and you're determined to change it, to make you're confessing it, you're admitting it to yourself, you're admitting it to, if you have a preceptor, a mentor, somebody to confess it formally, and then to ask for the adhisthana of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to actually help you to be able to keep your word in future. Because not only have you done this, but you've also broken your word, and that's in some ways even more dangerous, because you can't even trust yourself now. You can't trust yourself to do what you say you're going to do, which is the real essence of the Shila, really. So then you kind of do what you can to repair the power of your word. Do actions which are the opposite of what you did, to break it. But what's interesting, when I brought up this subject, I was talking about guardians. And if you've taken refuge and taken these precepts on in a genuine way, you will feel those guardians. They will actually be up in arms. And as you get close to that, they'll be up in arms. So then we can start looking at the precepts in a more subtle way. Killing humans, yes, but that's criminal in our country, in our world. But killing any form of life, killing animals, killing insects, killing pests, and then you start getting worried about killing bacteria. I mean, where's this stop? So the main line is with humans, but then where you draw the line, you've taken a vow. The precept was against humans, but obviously you want to apply it across the board to all beings who you want to help. You don't want to harm any being. So then all sorts of questions start arising, don't they? And especially these days when we're thinking about the sustainability of the planet and the ecosystem, there can be a lot of difference of opinion about what is the best thing to do, where to draw the line for us each individually, because even as long as we're in samsara, somehow or other we're always harming others. This is the terrible thing about samsara. So we need to kind of be really kind of be generous in our attitude towards ourselves and others, and realize that we're making decisions sometimes that we're not comfortable with. And that not comfortable with is good. Don't take that I'm not comfortable with it to mean, I'm doing something wrong. It's more like, of course I'm not comfortable with it. It's the guardians of the Mandala are telling me, you're very near the edge. Be careful. Be careful. Don't get careless about this. It matters. And showing respect to them, even if you find, choosing between the lesser of two evils. sometimes you're choosing between the lesser of two evils, to really be respectful to the guardians, that show regret and, in a way, explain why you're doing what you're doing. And then that helps you to be open to any opportunity that's there to mitigate it. Because if you just feel so uncomfortable, you don't want to think about it, sometimes just by not thinking about it, you miss opportunities. In my life story, you've got these stories of Kamatini Rinpoche pointing out to me that I missed opportunities because I was so busy making excuses and trying to sort of think, well, I have to, I can't. Well, just open out to it. If you can't, then just say you can't. And then as you say you can't, you realise, actually, there is something you can do often. So we should welcome those uncomfortable feelings. Not turn them into guilty feelings where you're sort of they build up into a sense of, oh dear, I hope nobody's looking, oh, I don't want to look there, oh, it's so excruciating. That's not positive, is it? But if you look at it and you think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try and do it, I've got to choose between two evils, and I'm really regretting that I'm still in samsara and I'm in that situation, and I'm making pranidhanas that I can get out of this situation where I find myself in these moral dilemmas or whatever it is. So it's very positive and forward-looking. I'm sorry, and what can I do to make up for it in some way, even if it's not immediately? Like, okay, I might not be able to help these beings now, but because of the connection I've made with them, may they be my disciples in my future life, and I'll be able to help them on the path to Dharma. So keep turning that uncomfortable feeling into something that's very positive and forward-looking, without sort of pushing aside the, like you're covering up or not really admitting what's really happening. So the guardians of the Mandala, and if we've taken commitments, at that time, we're actually creating this structure with guardians. And that's why it's called, Shila is sometimes compared with armor. Because when you've taken it on, you're going to have that emotional sense of, oh, I'm near the edge. Whereas if you never made the decision or intention that you weren't going to do something, you might find yourself just doing it. But if you really genuinely intended not to do something, the closer you get to it, the more uncomfortable you feel. So that's good. That's good. Your guardians are being active. Well, I haven't got all day, so I'm talking till 11, is it?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure if I can make an hour and a half, but anyway, there's a lot there to look at when we're thinking about taking refuge and making commitments, and the importance of acknowledging that uncomfortableness. And sometimes people, I've noticed, don't feel that uncomfortable. So when you think about that, so maybe it must do. It must go back to the way they took the commitment in the first place. Maybe they weren't single-minded in their commitment. They had some little reservations. I'm saying they, but we. If we say we're going to do something, but we have reservations, then when the situation changes, we find we've forgotten we even had a commitment. Whereas if you took it without any reservations, and when you're in a situation where you're tempted to go do something different, the strength of your intention makes those guardians very active. So they're more difficult to negotiate with. I mean, it can still be negotiated, but you tend to do it much more carefully and much more aware, and you're deciding. For example, you might have taken a commitment that later on you realise is actually, was not needed to be changed. in some way. So there's this very strong emotion then of these guardians of that original commitment, which are very genuine and need respecting, and then a negotiation of on what basis are you now changing the direction. And when that's clear and you think, yeah, that is, especially if you're a Dharma person, there's a deeper and more important Dharma principle involved here. So this is the only reason why that commitment is now in a way dissolving and it's being taken over by some other commitment which is of more importance. So you don't do it in a kind of dismissive way. You're really very careful, and then the guardians can be retrained to guard the new mandala if you've taken a new direction. But if you dismiss the guardians as being, oh, well, that's just my attachment, there's a danger then. You'll always see those uncomfortable feelings as being attachment. And then you become unreliable because even if you've given your word to something, if you decide to change, then you just do. You're not reliable, are you? And you can't even rely on yourself. So it's really important to distinguish between attachment and keeping to your word. I'm not saying, it's always so clear cut, but they are different principles to bear in mind. So having taken refuge, or the Bodhisattva vow, there's a good question came up with, well, how does that change your life? What is it? How's it going to make a difference to your life? And that's going to depend on you bringing it to mind. You can make a commitment. It's quite interesting. If you make a commitment and don't really think about it much, the guardians will be there. They will be making you feel uncomfortable. But they might not be able to really keep you on track. So to keep on track, you have to keep remaking or renewing, not rather than remaking, you keep renewing that commitment. And the standard way of doing it is kind of somewhat of a ritual in a way, that you just decide to say it. If it's the refuge, you say it every day. If you say it every morning and every evening, or if you say to yourself, I'm going to say it every morning, every lunchtime, every evening, or I'm going to say it before breakfast, after breakfast, before lunch, after lunch, before supper, after supper, before I go to bed. When I first wake up, I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to keep repeating it. And on my deathbed, I'm going to repeat it. So you make that determination, and then obviously that's a kind of ritual that brings you. It's like an A and a VAM. You keep having these VAM moments of coming back, focusing. But you do also need to reflect each time you take the refuge. You need to, as much as you can, to reflect on the meaning of it and take the meaning more deeply into your being. So it comes to mind more and more often and more naturally because it's your reference. What is my life about? It's about taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Am I really doing that? Is that what when I make a decision about my life's direction, is that what I consider first? How does this fit with my commitment to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha? Or do I make my decisions because of, I'd like to do this, and I'd like to do that, and this would be nice, and that would be nice, and what are other people doing? And yes, what was it? Yes, Dharma, yes, I've got that on the side too. But the other way round, this is my Dharma, this is my life, this is what I'm doing, following the path to awakening. Okay, I need to make a living, and I need to help my family, and I need to see to my responsibilities. I need to make sure I don't, I'm living in my life in a balanced and reasonable, sane way. So how do I get it all together? And then everything's in. That's the mandala of your life, then, isn't it? Your personal mandala is centered on that refuge, and that, again, you're training to do that. You might start off quite chaotic, and it's just a bit on the side that you kind of wish was a bit more strong, but isn't very strong. But the main part of what's going on is you're doing something, I don't know, whatever it is, and then gradually because you've made that commitment and because that's what you want in your heart, you're going to feel more and more uncomfortable. Isn't that good news? You're going to feel more and more uncomfortable, and I think we must have done this in past lives, because some of us do feel uncomfortable when we're not pursuing that sense of meaning, spiritual meaning, from very young. I mean, I did. Whereas my brothers didn't. At least one of them clearly didn't at all. So why did I have it and he didn't have it? I think it must have been because I was practicing before and I knew there was something else. I remember asking my brother once, "Don't you feel there's something else?" No. So I think, I find that quite encouraging. It does go from life to life. When you've taken refuge in one life, those guardians are there through the death process and into your future life. And that, of course, those guardians are going to attract you back into the Dharma. Because when you hear it, you're going to recognize it, and those guardians are going to say, "Yes, go for it." And the stronger they are, and the more respect you've paid to them in this life, the more respect you'll pay to them in the next. Which does raise this question that I actually, at one point, I thought I might make the main point of the talk, is, well, what are we then? What is this person that takes refuge? What is this person that takes a Bodhisattva vow? It's me. I take refuge. It's not like my skandhas take refuge. I think that's the question the Milarepa asks the shepherd boy, isn't it? Who takes refuge? Who's going to be there taking refuge? Taking refuge from what's impermanent and suffering. Who is that? We're not just impermanence and suffering. But what are we? That is, it's implicit in the whole taking of refuge, that we are what we are and we matter, and we could actually be liberated from suffering. So we're not the skandhas, we're not suffering. We're taking refuge so that we can realize that, and somehow we have an intuition of there is something else that isn't that. But of course we can't grasp it. When we grasp it, it kind of breaks up and becomes clunky. But when we don't grasp it, it's like a strong sense of going towards freedom and rightness and meaning, which becomes clearer and clearer as you follow the path. So what is that? What is that person that actually then has the audacity to take the Bodhisattva vow? I mean, it is audacious, isn't it? And it can only really be taken when there's a real understanding of the nature of ourselves and others. Really taken, but even before we've even got any understanding of emptiness or anything else, just the idea that there's actually, I'm going to bring all beings to awakening so that none of them suffers, they all go beyond suffering. And there's something in me when I hear that is, yes, that's it. That's it. That's what, my heart of hearts. That's what I long for. So why? All those beings are nothing to do with me. I don't know them. I could be happy without them being happy, but I can't actually. Not when I think about it. Or is it thinking, or is it when I open out to that possibility of them all being happy, all beings everywhere being happy? I don't know if it's thinking at all. It's something in my heart just kind of, it's really responding to that. So what is that? It's wonderful, isn't it? What is that? It's already accessible. That's, you could say that is the bodhicitta, that is our openness, clarity, sensitivity. It's already there. Just that we are inspired by that, and we want that, and it would even give our life meaning. It would be, this is it. This is what gives my life meaning. This aspiration, even if I forget about it most of the time, I keep coming back to it and remembering. Yeah, that's what really matters. That's what my life's about. That's the story of my life. Moving in that direction, even if it's very, very slowly. If I've moved a little in that direction, then my life has been worthwhile, isn't it? The Dalai Lama apparently sometimes says, just to not have got worse in this lifetime is already an accomplishment. Some words to that effect, anyway. So this renewing the vow daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, is really key. And it might seem like just a ritual, but it's interesting when we come to that section of the Living the Awakened Heart, what actually ritual does. But this ritual of doing it on the full moon, like renewing your commitments on the full moon, it's like there's the moon showing you, now is time, thank you, moon. And then there's the fading and the dark of the moon, and the renew again at the new moon, renew again at the full moon. It's really interesting how you can have a sense of a fresh start, can't you? We might lose that sense of a fresh start when we do it daily, but if you work on it, you can have a sense of a fresh start daily, which is certainly like that. That's why I like the start with death comes with that warning. Oh yes, gosh, this is my chance, fresh start. So those are the two things that I can think of. The narrative of what you tell yourself your life is about and what you're putting first. What are your priorities? And then keep repeating this intention, verbalizing it and reflecting on it, and then repairing things when they're not, you're not living up to that intention, So not letting yourself get into a feeling of despair and hopelessness and I'm no use, just never going there. Just close the door on any sort of thought that I'm not good enough, I'm failing. Close your door on that. You just don't go there. You always go in the direction of, okay, well, I'm going to do better. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, please help me to do better. I'm going to renew that intention, and this time I'm really going to keep it. And even if I don't, the Buddhas, please remind me and keep me on this path. Just keep that side of it. So there's a confession. Don't go that way. Go that way. Go the positive side of it. There's no virtue in wallowing in, I did these bad things in the past. There's no point. It's gone, done. But there is a point in thinking, I did that in the past. I'm not going to do that again. Well, that's worth it, isn't it? So remembering what you did in the past has been a trigger for you being more determined not to do it in the future. So what did I do in the past? What suffering it brought? Problems it brought? How I regret that? How I don't want that? Okay, then make a pranidhana that not to do it in the future, in all my future lifetimes, and I won't do it, and I will help other people not to do it. Really reinforce that good intention. Yes, I tend to talk in terms of the 5 precepts because in Gampopa's Dual Ornament of Liberation, it kind of emphasizes the 5 precepts. But it's also good to remember the 10 precepts, which I don't know if I've ever talked about. Do you all know what the 10 precepts are?
10 wholesome actions.
Yeah, 10 wholesome actions and 10 unwholesome actions. So, and they're good, aren't they? They're the 3 of body, which we've covered in the precepts, and then there's the 4 of speech, which are very interesting, aren't they? Because we make most of our bad karma through our speaking, don't we? That's where most of our day-to-day problems seem to arise from. So it's worth having really looking at those precepts. I can't remember the order in which they go now, but lying was one, which then there's the causing disharmony, using your talking to cause disharmony, and that in a way is the way we talk in a judgmental way, don't we? We kind of judge people and gossip about them and sort of say things that affect other people's minds about people, and that's why people feel judged, because people are talking in this way about them rather than in a very open and understanding way, helpful way. So that kind of divisive talk takes all sorts of shapes and forms, doesn't it? Maybe that's mainly what the MVC is about. Like divisive talk, even dividing in ourselves, one side of ourselves talking to the other side of it in this kind of very judgmental way. And then, of course, there's harsh speech, which, mostly we're quite civilized, aren't we? So we don't go around shouting abuse at each other and cursing and swearing at each other, and we're much more subtle, more likely to be saying things behind people's backs, And even then, that it depends on your motive. You might be saying something because you're trying to find a solution to a difficult situation, which isn't the same as divisiveness. It's the opposite, isn't it? You may be talking about somebody else, but your aim is to bring together, to bring harmony, not to cast them out or to divide people from, it's. And then the 4th one is the interesting one, which is sometimes translated as meaningless chatter. And I think in our day and age, we really need to look at this one. Not just what we're doing when we're talking to people around us, but also what we're doing on social media or any of these things that we have to entertain us. That we can actually spend our whole time, instead of really intensifying our Dharma intention and practice and benefiting others, we're actually kind of letting ourselves be totally distracted by all and anything, really. And that's, in a way, that's stealing our life away, isn't it? We have this opportunity to practice Dharma and to really connect to the Dharma and the Sangha and to really benefit others. And what do? We just chatter away, doing this and that. It's really important to look at that, isn't it? To what extent are we just filling our time with meaningless chatter? But then we have to be careful to get the right touch. And Khenpo Rinpoche is always very good about this one. He always says, and I think it's really good to interpret what he's saying as well. He said, joking isn't meaningless chatter because it makes people laugh. It makes them light-hearted. And I think you could take that principle quite a long way as well, couldn't you? There is a kind of meaningless chatter which is actually, it has a function. It is useful. It makes people feel more relaxed, makes them feel more at ease. It brings them enjoyment. It brings them a sense of, all sorts of things can happen when you're meaningless chatter. It's interesting, isn't it? So it's something about the right touch there. It's interesting, it's in those 10 precepts, the 4 of speech. We can use our speech to make people feel comfortable and at ease and happy, and we can use our speech just to kind of talk at people, so they actually feel, bombarded by you. It's not conducive. It's just like all sorts of things can happen, can't they, with meaningless speech? It's nothing. They're not lying. They're not doing anything bad. But I say we. I'm a natural chatterbox. Yeah, that's quite good. And then the ones of the mind, which are ill will, which obviously, when you take the Bodhisattva vow, you've committed yourself to goodwill. And even refuge, you're committed to goodwill, even though it's not explicit. I mean, you wouldn't. But definitely in the Bodhisattva vow, there's that. You're really looking carefully at any kind of ill will. And then this lovely term in Tibetan is nabsem, which reminds me of our English word nab. If you nab things, it's like nabsem. You want to nab it, even if it doesn't belong to anybody else, you still want to nab it. You always want to have and get things. So I like that expression, the nabsem. And then the last one is wrong views, which interesting one to look at, isn't it? How can you? I mean, that's actually how we've got into the mess we're in, is because we've not understood the nature of reality and we have wrong views. But in particular, in this context, it's talking about views that are against Dharma. So, for example, discouraging someone from practicing Dharma by telling them, something else is good. Like, a typical one would be that revenge is good. It's good to get your revenge on somebody else. And that would be a wrong view that you might have that in your culture. It might be something that is quite difficult for you to give up. But that would be a view that was actually going to lead to all sorts of trouble. You have your... Yeah, entitlement would be a wrong view as well, wouldn't it? Sort of like really feel I'm entitled to something. So you're only thinking of yourself and what you have a right to, rather than thinking about other people. And you believe it's right. You actually believe it's right. That's the point of the wrong view in this case. You believe something's right that actually isn't Dharma, and you think it is, or you think it's so true. You can't be, and yet it's actually going to cut against your Dharma practice. So there's another whole area you could look at there, isn't there? What sort of wrong views do we hold that obstruct our Dharma practice? So this commitment to always show respect to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and to take refuge again and again until you reach enlightenment, and so therefore it's for all your lifetimes, and then keeping these precepts, that's already a lot to consider, isn't it? I mean, what is a Buddha, for example? You're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. What is a Buddha? What is the Dharma? What is the Sangha? There's different, there's a Buddha, the Dharmakaya Buddha, the Sambhogakaya Buddha, the Nirmanakaya Buddha. There's, in the refuge ceremony, we have the image of the Buddha, the text of the teachings, the presence of the Sangha, or robes of the Sangha, or something like that, to represent the Sangha. So those symbols of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, when you take refuge, you commit yourself to respect those symbols even. You treat the sacred as sacred, which makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got things that are, sacred and have a power of adhisthana, then if you don't treat them with respect, you don't get that adhisthana, so you're not taking refuge in them. And then you've got the whole cosmic view of the Buddhas in their pure lands and surrounded by Bodhisattvas and who are actually accessible. Like when you pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they are actually present and they will actually respond, because this is the vast vision, because they're not limited in any way, so you only have to call them and they're there, which is quite interesting, isn't it? It's like in other religions it would be like God is always there, or Jesus is always there. It's the same sort of idea. So that would be the Sambhogakaya, and then you've got Dharmakaya, which goes beyond anything that you could fixate on. Like with the Sambhogakaya, you can sort of think of Pure Lands and you can think of them in their glory and their splendor and so on. But then with the Dharmakaya, it's gone beyond anything you can think of. It's like all pervading, and this is where we sit in meditation, formless meditation, just trying to. It all emanates from, emptiness. It all emanates from the Dharmakaya. So we could. I mean, a year wouldn't be enough, would it, to prepare? But the good thing is, though, that it is spiral. So, as over the years, your understanding deepens and deepens, and all these areas start to come together as one thing. You realize, in a way, that it's all one mandala, or all of a piece. So the commitment for the Bodhisattva vow is sometimes spelled out, and there's I don't know. I can't remember how many there are, but sets of them. 16 this is, and 4 that's, and so on. So that there are texts that go into them in great detail, but I never found those detailed texts were very interesting and helpful, really. They seem to have arisen, much like the Vinaya, from incidents where bodhisattvas have done something which has then subsequently been written down as not what you should do. But when I look at them, they're all summed up by not harming others, actually. It's all different kinds of harm you might do. And I think, well, why is that a bodhisattva? Because, that would apply to refuge as well, surely. Showing respect to bodhisattvas, for example. Well, if you take a refuge, you would show respect for beings anyway, wouldn't you? You wouldn't, or teachers or whatever. But I suppose it's even worse if you've taken your bodhisattva vow. I must say, I don't see a tremendous advantage in listing the same things that you're not that you wouldn't do, even if you'd taken refuge, as specific to the bodhisattva vow. But it might be interesting at some point to look at them. A lot of them are specific to the time and place when they were written as well. So I think it's already enough to remember the main one, which is you don't reject any being. That would be against your Bodhisattva vow. And I think that's the one that we're most likely to fail in. There could be somebody that we hear of, or we encounter, or who does something to us, where we attempted to say, I will never forgive you. I will never help you. I will never, I'm cutting you off entirely. And if that starts to come up, that would be really against your Bodhisattva vow. That should feel very, very, very uncomfortable, and your Mandala guardian of the Bodhisattva vow should be absolutely screaming, no, you can't do that. You can't do it. You've got to find some other way of dealing with this situation. This is, yeah. So when I jokingly say, well, just shoot them. If somebody's that bad, just shoot them. It is a joke. Maybe I shouldn't even say it even as a joke. But I think the reason I say it is because it's like making friends with my jackal. There's a part of me that really wants to shoot them. And by saying it, I can see that part of me, and I can actually rein it in. I can actually sort of see, clearly I'm not going to do that. So I've got to really work on that. That I can't shoot them. I have committed myself to bringing them to enlightenment, and they are so impossible. They are so impossible. They're so hopeless that they will ever turn around, that I can ever, change them or help them in any way. I need to face that in myself and think, well, that's just faint-heartedness. That's just me being faint-hearted and thinking, giving up on someone. And then change it round to a pranidhana. May in all my lifetimes I be able to help this person until they are actually freed from samsara. And that really wakes me up. Again, it's that positive side, isn't it? You don't go into that, they're hopeless. You go into, there's no being that is not hasn't got some hope, because they are already openness, clarity, sensitivity. Just really suffering and causing a lot of suffering around them. So then it leads to compassion, doesn't it, quite quickly. But there's a tendency, if you hear about somebody who's really bad, or you encounter someone who's really bad, you just want to get away from them, don't you? In your mind, you just want to just get away from them. So it's really important to remember, even this person, I have committed myself to bringing them, to working with them and helping them until they reach enlightenment. And it reminds you how vast the vision is of the Bodhisattva vow. We're going to be around a long time. So any kind of faint-heartedness, really. Once you've taken the Bodhisattva vow, any kind of faint-heartedness like that, the guardians should be there, making you feel uncomfortable. You can't give up because you're Bodhisattva. You can't. There's no other way. You have to go on. You have to commit yourself to helping these people. This is your path. There isn't anything else to do. And that brings up the three kinds of Bodhisattva. I don't know if you've heard this. The three kinds of Bodhisattva. It's usually described as three different kinds of Bodhisattvas, but I think it's three different ways in which our Bodhisattva conduct manifests in our life. So sometimes it's like the ferryman, sometimes like the shepherd, and sometimes like the king. So the ferryman Bodhisattva is like the way we work in our Sangha. We're all working towards enlightenment ourselves, our own practice, and we're all supporting each other and helping each other as we go along. So we're all going together in the same boat, as it were. So sometimes we're doing that. And then sometimes it's the shepherd, or maybe I should say the king next. So sometimes we have the opportunity to go off into retreat, and then we're practicing, you might say, it looks like for ourselves alone. But the idea is, if I can actually progress in my shamatha and vipassana practice and my meditation and reflection, then I actually can help people more. So I'm more like, then I'm ahead of them. I'm like the king who can now provide what, like a teacher can then create a court, rule the country and help everybody to practice Dharma because they've arrived at that place, that more powerful place. So sometimes we might be doing that. And then sometimes it's like the shepherd. And the more I think about the shepherd herding the flock, so the shepherd isn't thinking about their own progress, they're thinking about getting the flock to where they need to be. So they're herding from behind, as it were. And whenever I think of that, I think you have to already be very sure where you're going, don't you? You have to already be very... So it would be like a bodhisattva who's already quite advanced on the path could then take on that responsibility, and they got to the point where they're not thinking about their own progress or enlightenment, they're just simply working for the benefit of others. But they have to have reached the point where they can really do that. If we were to try and do that and think, well, I don't need to practice because I'm just helping others. I suppose it could be at that level as well, couldn't it? It could be somebody, well, that wouldn't be so much a shepherd, just supporting others to practice. But no, I think it's more that sense of not having to think about yourself getting there, because you've got to that point where you can see clearly enough that there's where you're going and that there's no need to do anything for yourself, but you can work for others. So I think maybe that's something to aspire to. I've heard teachings on these three examples given from different points of view and different lamas favouring different aspects. And I know Gendam Rinpoche is very much for the king. Get into retreat, get into your meditation, get there yourself, and then you can really help others. You can't help others until you've actually got there yourself. So he was really emphasising that in his among his students. Whereas I don't think I'm so much. I think I'm more ferryman, and encouraging us to practice as ferrymen, that we're keeping the boat afloat and we're going along with everybody else and helping each other along the way. But it's interesting, these three images, isn't it? It's not just one way of going about this bodhisattva activity. And of course, as bodhisattvas, once you've taken the bodhisattva vow, you're committing yourself also to the path of the 6 paramitas. When I read the 6 paramitas, and they're always associated with the Mahayana, they're not really any different from any Dharma practitioner, really, are they? I mean, that sense of openness and generosity and giving and expressing and receiving the energy of being in the presence of the Buddha and participating, and that energy exchange, and that's how you express love and compassion as well, isn't it? Through generosity, include protecting the lives of others in generosity. So it's a big topic, generosity, huge. And then we've talked about Shila, being able to decide that this is what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and then accomplishing what you say you're going to do, if it's Dharma, and then that being able to, that's staying power. So there's the power of your word, and then the staying power that you can follow through with Kshanti. You can follow through, you're not easily knocked off course. And then that brings this energy together to because you're becoming more integrated, and so the energy isn't being dissipated all over the place, and that's when the samadhi is possible, because it becomes totally integrated. Body, speech, and mind, you're integrated. So when you sit to meditate, when you sit to reflect on the Dharma, or to some insight arises, you're stable, you stay like that, and then as the insights arise through the your insights, the prajna, you see, and when you see, seeing is liberation. That's what we say, don't we, every day? Seeing the truth is liberation. So that's the mandala. I mean, in a way, the paramitas are a mandala, aren't they? A practice mandala, sort of setting you up to be able to, so the prajna can come in as the central principle and just pervade the whole thing. And it just is bodhicitta, isn't it? The whole thing is the radiance of the bodhicitta, coming back to radiance again. Mandalas are radiance, aren't they? Like they emanate from some place. So there's the place they emanate from and the radiance, which aren't two, but actually, in a way, there's a play between them, isn't there? Even though they're not separate. So, anyway, I filled the time, fancy that. So I just want to finish on this, emphasizing again this not disparaging bodhisattvas. Once you've taken the bodhisattva vow, it's particularly important. It's always important, but for bodhisattva, it's particularly important to, when you see other bodhisattvas or other people aspiring to be bodhisattvas or committed to the bodhisattva path, to really appreciate their qualities, appreciate that commitment, that the intention, that what they really represent. And when you see their faults, not to think, oh well, they're not bodhisattvas because they've got faults. It's like they are bodhisattvas, and these faults are actually, that's what they're working with. So they're not intrinsic to their being, as it were. So you don't exaggerate their faults by saying, they're not really a bodhisattva. But they are bodhisattvas on the path. And that applies also to oneself. So when you see in yourself all your faults, that doesn't mean, don't take those to be what you are. This is a really important aspect of the Bodhisattva vow. Your faults are not what you are. If you believe that, that is against your Bodhisattva vow. So you don't disparage yourself in that way. You recognize, like we were doing earlier this week, what are my strengths? Okay, yes, I have this Bodhisattva intention. Yeah, not to disparage that. That is who I truly am. And okay, there are these things that I'm working with and I'm training with. That's why I'm on the path. They're not what I am. It's really important. And it's important for everybody, whether they've taken the Bodhisattva vow or not, but particularly important if you've taken the Bodhisattva vow. Yeah, you've recognized your openness, clarity, sensitivity. Remember that. That is your bodhicitta. That is who you truly are. And this is your story. You're going through difficulties. That's sins finishing. Going through difficulties. Yeah. And these other things that need dealing with, Tibetans call them nyumun. You could say kleshas. In Sanskrit it's klesha. But the way they say nyumun is so nice. I was telling Tara this the other day. They say it, like if we were to say, oh, that's my klesha, or that's my negative emotions, or that's my greed, hate, and delusion, it's kind of depressing, isn't it? Whereas when they say nyumun, it's like recognizing this as something that's universal and it's our business in a way. You know, we've all got Nyumo. We've all got klesha. We've all got these. It literally means trouble in Tibetan. We're all troubled with these weaknesses and habitual ways of behaving and thinking and reacting and being triggered. We've all got it, and it's either taking one form or another. You know, sometimes it takes the form of me getting excited. Sometimes it takes the form of me dropping asleep. Sometimes it takes the form of getting angry or anxious, or whatever it is. But it's always just the same thing. It's just Nyumo, and it's got a kind of, when you talk about other people suffering, it's their Nyumo. Oh, I understand. It's Nyumo. I understand. Oh, it's Nyumo. It's Nyumo. This is, you know, hello, here we are. Rather than, oh, this terrible thing that, oh, you know, what can I do? Sort of, yeah, that's it. It's Nyumo. So I'm on the path to awakening. I'm working with that and take this positive attitude. So whether that's for refuge or for Bodhisattva vow, or just general advice to anyone really, but particularly if you've taken refuge and you've taken the Bodhisattva vow, to keep aligned with that. And the same, you know, like the refuge, you recite it regularly, and the same with the Bodhisattva vow, and then on the full moon you make this renewal of that Bodhisattva vow and the refuge vow, and keep coming back to that as a sort of vam, the full moon and the new moon, the full moon, the new moon, just to keep. It's really helpful to use the moon as a focus for that. Okay. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully.